Hi, EDR listeners. As the summer wraps up in the United States, we are planning some great new episodes for you. For this week, going into the holiday weekend, we are going to do a throwback episode, and we plan to release a brand new episode in 2 weeks from now. Thank you all so much for listening, and we look forward to giving you some great new episodes in the future. Welcome to another episode of the Erectile Dysfunction Radio podcast. Today, we're bringing you a pretty special episode. We're joined by a guest who is going to remain anonymous over this episode. He's here to tell his story of his experience of erectile dysfunction, some of the things that he has tried. We're going to learn about his personal story. I will be asking some questions to him to help clarify. Now, just a little bit of background. I have not spent very much time other than a basic introduction meeting this person. So this is pretty raw for both he and I. Hopefully this episode can give our listeners a little bit of an insight towards how a sex therapist may structure and think about approaching and helping men who are struggling with erectile dysfunction, among other sexual dysfunctions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our guest to tell us just a little bit about his story, and we'll get into things from there. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I've been listening to your podcast because of some of these things that have been going on with my life, relatively recent changes. So I'm happy to be on here, and thanks for the opportunity to participate, because I think you're providing a really important service and providing a lot of content that's been really helpful to a lot of people, especially myself. So a little bit about myself, and I'll tell you my story. So I'm 55 years old. I'm a professional. Highly educated. I'm very physically fit. I work out almost every day, very low body fat, in very good health. And basically what my story boils down to is I got out of a relationship a few years, about in last December. And in that relationship, we had an extremely healthy sexual relationship. It was a very intense, really good sex, if you might say. Very frequent sex. I had no problem in the sack. I felt very manly, so to speak. And everything was pretty much, peachy and hunky-dory. But long story made short, it wasn't really a relationship that was going to work out with me, because I never fell in love with her, and this wasn't one of those kinds of relationships. And so we broke it off, and that was that. Fast forward to now, and so I met my new girlfriend about 3 months ago, and it was one of those kind of Hollywood movie moments when you meet, you just hit it off and you feel chemistry, and we felt this really incredible connection, and it turns out we live very close to each other, and all these interesting coincidences. We're at the same places in our life in terms of parenting and all that good stuff. And basically, we hit it off, and we developed feelings for each other very quickly. Fell in love. I'm totally crazy about her. She's crazy about me, and ended up in a situation where, when it was time to become intimate, I had problems where I was having difficulty achieving an erection, and then when I did, I would have difficulty maintaining it once we started having penetrative sex, which was really crazy and very difficult for me to deal with because of my past, high performance and my very high confidence in my ability that way sexually. And also, especially since she's extremely attractive and she checks all the boxes in terms of all the things that turn me on from a physical perspective. And that's basically what my story is all about, is going from so-called stud, in my opinion, and also from what my previous girlfriend used to always tell me, to now in a situation where I'm in a completely opposite situation. So it's been very kind of frustrating, the good news is she's been very supportive, and she's very good communicator. And I've basically told her what's going on. And I think it's an issue with performance anxiety, which I've never really had before. And it's been kind of a journey to move past this and and have our sexual relationship develop. And things have been getting better with each experience, but I'm just not quite there yet.
Okay, so one is, I appreciate just the level of detail that you're providing. Is it okay if I ask some questions that may seem basic or intuitive to you, certainly after listening to some of our podcasts, but I want to just make sure that we're covering our bases here so that our listeners understand some of the things that go into an assessment and making sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so during this 3-month period, it's a new relationship, and what you're describing is that it's a really checking off all the boxes in terms of what you're looking for, and you've got very strong feelings toward her. It sounds like she has strong feelings toward you. Now, in that time period, did you seek any medical help? Have you spoken with a medical doctor for a physiological assessment?
No, I have not, but I do have an appointment in a week or so to see a urologist to get checked up. In any case, but honestly, I don't believe there's anything physically wrong with me, but that's for the doctor to assess.
Okay, and that's very often is the case, that there isn't necessarily a physiological or a medical issue going on, but because the complexity of sexual function is a crossroads between the mind and the body. We definitely want to make sure that that is a part of a thorough assessment to make sure that there isn't any underlying conditions. Now, it sounds like what you're describing is that this only emerged in this newer relationship. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Is there any history of any other sexual challenges or sexual function challenges that would include premature ejaculation, other recurrences of erectile dysfunction, delayed ejaculation, low desire, anything like that in your history?
So yes, that's a great question. I did have an issue with my wife. So this is kind of a side story. I don't know how it also falls into the equation. I was married for 23 years. And towards the end of that, the last 7 or 8 years, things went downhill. My wife developed an alcoholism problem. We had all kinds of problems in the relationship. I ended up taking an SSRI, which had some pretty severe sexual side effects, and so I tried to counterbalance that with PDE5 inhibitors, Viagra, and that worked. But unfortunately, I ended up in a situation where I would have delayed ejaculation, which was also frustrating. So yes, I've gone through that. I've gone through some of these erectile dysfunction issues in the past. This was primarily because of a difficult relationship, and she eventually ended up taking her life, which created a whole new other set of problems for me and made me sort of emotionally unavailable for some time. As a matter of fact, when I started with my previous girlfriend, I was still on the SSRI, and I had to get off of that in order to be able to perform and be able to complete sex successfully. And that actually took some time to get off the SSRI, which took some time and was pretty unpleasant.
Okay, so obviously, what you're sharing, for the benefit of our listeners, also carries tremendous emotional weight, just in terms of losing a partner who takes their own life. No doubt, there's a tremendous emotional toll. So I don't want to just skim over that, and I think it's just important to recognize that this is beyond just an assessment, that you are a human being with a complex emotional world like everybody else. Staying on our topic, though, so you're saying there have been other occurrences of ED, both, it sounds like, medically induced, that you balanced out, medicinally induced, I should say, that you balanced out with a PDE5 inhibitor. It led to other challenges, though, delayed ejaculation, which is common or relatively common with an SSRI. But without the medication, it sounds like there were other occurrences of ED stemming from relationship challenges. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. During that time and or currently, were you able to gain and maintain an erection on your own?
Yes, that's never been a problem. Yeah, and so that's why I was saying I don't suspect anything is physically wrong with me. Matter of fact, if I fast forward to my most recent encounter with my new girlfriend, um, I was able to relax a lot more, and there was a lot of being able to get erection was not a problem. Keeping it for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, and then for whatever reason it would subside, and it would be a lot of stop and start. Um, and what was frustrating is, well, first of all, she had no problem with it because she pointed out that we've been going at it for 2 hours, stop and start, so she was perfectly fine with it. Mm-hmm. I didn't really think about that and look at the clock, but so I guess that made me happy in a certain way. But I was frustrated because even though I get super close, I could not complete. So just recently, I was dealing with this delayed ejaculation, which, yeah, I don't know what's going on there. I'm just hoping that maybe relaxing and over the next few times we get together, that will resolve itself. But I don't know.
And like you said, this may be stemming from a performance anxiety, which can impact both gaining and maintaining an erection and ejaculation. So that is certainly a possibility here. Now, this is happening like really currently for the first time, like over a 3-month period. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the last time we were in a sexual situation was just a few days ago. Actually, was the first time we had this stop start with a delayed ejaculation problem. Whereas previously, I would either initially not be able to get an erection at all, or I would be able to get one and then I would lose it, and that would be it. I couldn't get it back again. So it feels like I'm making progress. I'm just not quite there yet.
Okay, so I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like it has gone from not being able to gain to being able to gain and struggling to maintain, to a stop-start kind of situation, but not culminating in ejaculation. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's exactly correct.
Okay. Now, I also recognize that your current partner may listen to this episode at some point, so I want to be sensitive about the questions that I ask. And again, the details are not, I think, overly important for our listeners to understand, but I want to be curious if there's any nerves that you're experiencing with this relationship, perhaps stemming from the significance that it is carrying for you, the way you've described how you feel toward her, the high levels of attraction, checking all the boxes. It sounds like this relationship is delivering something for you that you have not quite experienced, at least in a while, perhaps at any point. Do you have a sense of feeling nervous, a pressure to perform, not wanting to lose her as a partner?
Yeah, all of the above. This is a very unique situation for me, and I haven't felt this kind of passion and closeness in a very, very long time. I think this is the first time I've fallen in love with someone before we've actually had a very active sex life. So that kind of puts my head in a different space. And it definitely makes me put additional pressure on myself. I know realistically that she's not going to quote unquote leave me over this. We've discussed it. She basically tells me, I'm not worried about it. You're the only one that's worrying about it, that kind of a thing. But, deep inside there's always a concern that when you have someone and you don't want to lose someone, and you want to do everything in your power to prevent that.
Okay. So it sounds like she's very supportive. She's saying all the right things, and it's not uncommon that, even when a partner is very supportive, a man can still struggle like internally, like with your own paradigm, just not really sure if it really is okay. Does she really mean this? Or are you going to lose her or lose the relationship? Or is she going to be disappointed? And it sounds like there's a little bit more of that internal individual process happening for you. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate because I understand. I've been around long enough. I've had enough experiences to know that nothing in life is guaranteed and nothing is absolute. So I don't take anything as 100% guaranteed. There's always a chance that something could happen. Now, the other thing I want to mention that you had touched on about checking all the boxes. This is kind of feels like a paradox to me, but I find her extremely attractive, and there are times when we're having sex, I'm a little intimidated by how hot she is. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that she's my girlfriend and that we're doing this. And it's kind of odd that she is so gorgeous and so good looking and it checks all my boxes. Sometimes that makes me feel a little bit intimidated, and I've never felt that way before with anyone in my life.
And I appreciate you calling it a paradox, because being so attracted to somebody, our intuition would tell us that should be delivering high levels of stimulation. And to a certain extent it probably is, but at the same time, like, you're kind of up in your head a little bit, questioning, like, is this real? Am I missing something? Does she really want to be here with me? Kind of feel like she's out of my league to a certain extent, or I can't believe this is happening to me.
Yep.
which does kind of distract and take you away from that pleasure.
That's absolutely right. And that's exactly what's going on in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing I try not to do is she in the short time that we've been together, she knows me pretty well. She can look at me and say, oh, I can see you're getting in your head. Get out of your head. So she can see the wheels spinning sometimes. And that's my biggest challenge, is relaxing and stopping the wheels from spinning and just enjoying the moment and not thinking about those things.
So here's where I'd want to be curious, and I'm not going to go into this right now, but I want to be curious about any other historical experiences, not necessarily sexual, but perhaps with other female partners or female interests, where you kind of questioned your position in that relationship, or if you were worthy, or like experiences of intimidation, because I'd be curious where else that might be linked, in your paradigm, because there is something very paradoxical about landing in the dream relationship, feeling really excited, really happy about it, but also not being sure if this could really be something that you're worthy of, or feeling intimidated by your partner. So that would be one of the areas that I think would be worthwhile to take a closer look at. Of course, I'm not going to open that up for you.
Yeah. So just briefly, I would say, I think my very first long-term relationship, when I was in college, long time ago, I have felt that with my first girlfriend, but it didn't end up. It didn't result in what I'm dealing with right now. I guess I had some of those feelings, but I got over them pretty quickly.
Okay, and again, it's something. One of the complexities that we talk about is, as men age, they do kind of lose some of that biological. I call it a biological jetpack that does kind of diminish over time. So sometimes underlying insecurities may not present themselves for years or even decades, because the body has a quick mechanism to kind of power through that, and then it doesn't become overly relevant. But over time, with the aging process, and also with the aging brain, and having relationship history, having been hurt in relationships and whatnot, that can sow deeper doubts, and you also have less of a biological boost to power through that. So what you're experiencing now may have some roots in earlier experiences. And again, it may be subtle in some of those earlier experiences. It may be more pronounced for other people. But again, just be an area that I would be curious to ask more about. Along those same lines, I mean, I think it's important for our listeners to understand that we'd want to have a more in-depth relationship history with the other relationships, to kind of understand if there are any specific patterns that have been unhelpful in the past, Is there anything that's making this relationship specifically intimidating? I want to have a more thorough history for that to really have a better understanding. Now, you also mentioned performance anxiety. You can answer this question with a yes or no if it feels too invasive or too revealing. But I want to be curious if there's any mental health history, if there's any predisposition to anxiety, if anxiety manifests in any other areas of your life in a significant or pronounced type of way, or if it seems to be much more acute to this relationship or the sexual experience.
Yeah, so I did go through a period of my life with the latter part of my marriage combined with an extremely stressful job where I was just way off the charts, just an anxiety basket case. It was pretty bad for several years. I did a lot of work to gather myself up and deal with the loss and what happened and how it happened. And of course, I have two teenage kids and helping them and worrying about them and all that. But I have to say that right now, I am not in a very high anxiety state in general. I'm actually right now, honestly, right now, I feel like I'm like the most healthy, the most physically fit, and probably among the most happy I've been in my entire life right now. I just feel like things are just really connecting and things are happening for me and life is good. And I just see this episode with the ED as kind of a speed bump I got to get over.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you've had periods of more pronounced anxiety. This certainly is one of the times in your life when it has been far lower. So another question I want to be curious about is, because of the significance that this relationship has for you, and I think the potential that it really carries and how good you feel in it, do you think about the relationship in that same sort of intimidating way, or is this specific to the sexual side of the relationship?
It's strictly with respect to the physical sexual side of the relationship.
Okay. Now, I'd also be curious, is your partner younger than you by any significant type of way? Is there a reason that you might be intimidated beyond physical appearance, just in terms of fear of maybe she'll find a different partner? Is there any unique components to the relationship that would cause that gap or that perceived gap between the two of you to be more pronounced?
She's only 3 years younger. And honestly, no, I don't actually really worry about her seeing someone else or betraying me or anything like that. It's strictly one of these, oh my gosh, she, like I said, she just checks all the boxes, and sometimes the stimulation, the visual stimulation, because she checks all the boxes, can feel a little overwhelming, and I have to get out of my head.
Okay, you're saying that goes back to this paradox, and I would imagine that is going to be one of the areas that you're primarily going to want to look at and to address, which is that experience of acute. I'm even hesitant to call it anxiety or worry, as much as just the almost like the pinch yourself type of thinking that's going on there of, is this real? Is this really me? Is this happening? It's too good to be true type of thinking. Yep. Seems to take you outside of the experience and really puts you into a position where you're thinking and analyzing much more than you are experiencing.
Yeah, that's I would say that's true. I mean, I'm not sure that that's the primary driver behind what I'm experiencing, but it's certainly a factor.
Okay, and how would you describe the primary, or what you see as the primary factor?
So I still think the primary factor is being able to perform the way I used to. the way I previously did. It's really, I've kind of realized that it's really all on me. It's not on her. She's never complained, and she's happy with the skills that I do have that don't require, an erect penis.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I have this view of how I'm supposed to perform based on how I did in the previous relationship. And it was a little disconcerting to get into this new relationship and not just pick up where I left off, and basically feeling like I had to start all over again.
Okay, and this is a really important point that you're bringing up, because it is certainly separate from feeling just intimidated by a partner, which
Mm-hmm.
is almost holding yourself to a previous bar, and being somewhat mind occupied with, like, well, it's not performing in the same kind of way. Why is this happening? What's going on for me? And that certainly has much more of a performance anxiety feel. Again, it sounds
Yep.
like what you're describing is less about the impact that it's having on your partner, and much more about, this isn't me, or this isn't the way I was performing before. What's going on with me?
That is exactly what's going on in my head, is what is wrong with me, and why am I unable to do what I was doing previously just a few months ago? 6 months ago.
Yeah, and that's also an important distinction for our listeners to understand, is that performance anxiety is not a one size fits all. Some people experience performance anxiety because of the reaction of a partner, whether it's real or perceived. They're very preoccupied with what the impact is on a partner. Reassurance sometimes can be helpful, sometimes it isn't. But other men are much more concerned about, well, this isn't me. This isn't the way I was, and what's wrong with me, or what's different, or am I ever going to get back to how things were before? And that could be a very mind occupying train of thought to be stuck in. And even when a partner says, "Hey, I'm good," the response generally is, "Okay, but I'm not, because this is not who I am. This is not what I'm used to. And I just want that old self back." That, again, wasn't so long ago, right? Based on what you're sharing. And that could be troubling, and that could certainly be mind occupying.
You are totally exactly spot on. You are exactly where my head is. That's exactly right.
Okay. And one of the things that we talk about, both in the podcast, and I think also mention it on the e-course, is the performance anxiety can begin to dip into much more of like an anticipatory anxiety, where over time it goes from something that's very, very in the moment, to starting to think about it a little bit more outside of the moment. And that anxiety can sort of bleed out into, well, a couple hours before I'm going to see my partner, I already starting to think about it, starting to worry about it. Has that been your experience at times?
So yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned this. Okay, so I did get your course. This is not a plug. Mark did not ask me to plug this. This is one of the reasons why I was, listening to the podcast, because I got a lot out of the course, and I did learn about that from the course. And yes, I did experience a little bit of that, but I didn't really. There was a lot of stuff in the course that I hadn't thought about or didn't know before, and once I was exposed to that idea, that became less of an issue with me. One of the things that has really helped me, Mark, from the course, was this whole idea of asking yourself, and I've discussed this with my girlfriend, and this has really, really helped. And I think it's one of the reasons why we had such a good experience the last time, was this whole idea of asking myself and exploring and embracing, well, what do you like? And talking about it with your partner. So I spent some time writing down all the things that I like. What are all the things that turn me on? What are all the things that, I like to do? What are all these fantasies and all this stuff? And we didn't have a super long talk about it, but I told my girlfriend, hey, these are the things that turn me on. And I'm embracing these things. And so you should know. And she was actually really surprised that I was talking to her about this, because that's not something couples usually talk about. You're supposed to be some sort of mind reader and figure it out. I'm like, you know what? from what I learned in your course, I'm not going to force anyone to be a mind reader. I'm going to be straight ahead and say, this is what I like. And now she knows, and she's perfectly happy and willing to participate and, in those things that I like. And that was one of the things that made it a lot easier for me to relax, is it's like, okay, I'm telling her these things. I don't have this anticipatory anxiety because she knows what I like, and I feel totally comfortable telling her the things that I like. And she's actually really happy and pleased that I'm open and trusting enough with her to tell her these kinds of things, because you feel kind of vulnerable when you're expressing yourself in those ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very vulnerable, and that communication piece can be really, really huge in staving off the anticipatory anxiety and actually getting the process to kind of move in the other direction, where you can kind of whittle it down to things that are very, very acute, very specific, making them a lot easier to address.
Well, yeah, because now there were a few times when I was like, kind of dreading what's going to happen next time. But now it's totally turned around. It's like, okay, it's not exactly to where I was before, and that's fine. I know I'm getting there. I know this is a temporary situation, but now I'm totally looking forward to the next opportunity we have. And your course helped me to get my head there. I don't think I'd be there if I hadn't really thought about all those things that I learned.
Well, I mean, I do appreciate the plug, even though I know that was not intentional. And no. So, that was something that we did not even discuss prior to doing this episode together. And even in this conversation that you and I are having, as you're fully aware, if you've been through the whole course, we can't even cover all the components in this conversation that are covered in the course. Right. There's just so many pieces and so many factors, but it sounds like getting a little bit more focus on the things that do work for you and pleasure has also been very helpful. I think, like you shared at the beginning of this conversation, things have been progressively like improving and getting better for you, which is certainly the direction that we want to see things going in. So it sounds like that you're really starting to do some of that work and starting to gain some momentum in the opposite direction. Is that how you've been feeling about this?
Yes, totally. I'm super, super happy that things are moving in the right direction. I mean, obviously I'd like to be back in the saddle, so to speak, where I was performing the way I was before, but that's not reality. And I know I'll get there. I'm just happy that it's moving in that direction rather than going in the other direction, which would be devastating.
Yeah, so I'm really glad to hear about that. And I know that we could talk, far longer about the details, because this is so complex, but I greatly appreciate you coming onto this episode and sharing elements of your experience. I think it's really going to help our listeners understand just how complex understanding these factors are and how challenging it can be to really get there. But once you do, and once you begin to implement some of these things, the direction of things like erectile dysfunction, other sexual function challenges really can turn around. So I appreciate you coming on, being vulnerable about your story, and I think our listeners are really going to benefit from this.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.